you, and thanks Nicole and everybody for setting things up.
You might want that.
Yep. Let's see if things work here. All right. Oh. All right. So, to burn or not to burn, that is the question, right? And if you remember kind of your high school Shakespeare class, Hamlet in that soliloquy is really asking the question, should I act or should I not act, right? And that's kind of where we're at. So here we are in Southern California, here in the map. We're in North County, San Diego. And as you can see, there's a lot of chaparral and shrubland from this veg map. The region holds a high priority as it relates to California shrublands. I was raised in where this black dot to the left is. I don't know if you can see that black dot. And then all the work I'm going to be talking about is on where the little black dot to the right is. Everybody see that?
Yeah.
All right. So there's lots of chaparral down here. And this is what our area looks like. It's a beautiful picture. This is near Camp Pendleton Marine Corps Base where I grew up. And I grew up crawling through those areas as a little kid, and I wasn't pretending to be a forester or an ecologist at that time. I had another profession in mind before that. But I wasn't the only person crawling through the bushes in the early 1980s. These people were. And in fact, this group of chaparral managers decided to get together at that time and create a newsletter with the goal of, see if this sounds familiar to you, increasing interagency exchange of ideas and information and applied research between chaparral managers. Sounds pretty common, huh? And who were these people? They were these people back then. A lot of great people, good folks from agencies, landowners, ranchers, all looking for ways to manage chaparral. And let's look at, I'm going to take a look at their focus in the early 1980s, right? So the goal as they laid this out was to reduce the potential for loss of life, property loss, and resource damage from large-scale wildfire. And here are the ways they wanted to accomplish that. They had some newsletter topics, right? Prescribed burning at the urban-wildland interface. Prescribed burning to enhance rare and endangered species hypothesis. They had it turns out, that they had a symposium in Arroyo Grande in 1982. Some may be of you may have been there, but don't raise your hand if you were. And here are some common threads, right? Prescribed burning, prescribed fire, loading, the need for chaparral management through burning, a mosaic pattern, using wildland fire for resource benefit. Sounds familiar? Preferring young stands of chaparral. And the most important part for this talk is that doing nothing is a management strategy, and it's okay to do nothing as long as you understand that that also has consequences. So I'd like to shift gears now and see some examples of doing nothing and doing something, okay? Sometimes when we do nothing, wildfires happen, and that's not all bad. The Mesa Fire was a 350-acre wildfire in Paula, California. The fire started due to neighbors target shooting, allegedly, in non-native grassland in the San Luis Rey riverbed. Seasonal onshore winds pushed the fire to the east towards the Paula Indian Reservation. And the fire was in early or late June. Seasonal winds, nothing crazy, and temps were, as you see, and Also, to note that last bullet that it was a head fire driven up. We'll talk more about that in a minute. So here's the perimeter of the fire. As you can see, it ranged in elevation. It was driven by low to moderate winds. Fire followed the topography quickly, making its way through the lowland chaparral. It's close to sage scrub pretty much, and into Chemise chaparral. You'll get sick of Chemise by the end of the day. I'm going to talk about it. Before petering out at the top of the ridge. Here's some vegetation mapping. It's important to understand that, as many have said, a lot of these species in this burn were sprouters, including chemise. There's some sumac, elderberry, some sages, and you can see the retardant drops if you look close on the lee side of that ridge. And as per local fire chief knowledge, this whole area had burned in a wildfire 68 years previously. Here's mapping from CDF at the time. It's the area in green, and it does encompass the whole burn. Also note again that this was a head fire driven uphill. I'm gonna try to go quickly here, sorry. Preheated fuels, all that's important for later. Here's some photos of fire effects immediately after. I like to call it a scab rather than a scar because moderate fire intensity fire tends to not leave, lots of scars in the land. Here's some photos from post-fire surveys. This survey was done about 18 months after, and it's important to note we had about 14 inches of rain in that time. Some laurel sumac. Shout them out if you know them. Some white sage. All right, some stinging lupine. And all these guys. So those are all on our fire scab. A lot of 100-hour fuels remained in that fire. So we can see there's a lot of life in that post-fire, and that's not always the case. And much of that likely has to do with the species that were present and the conditions under which the fire burned. Two really important conditions from my point of view are RH and live fuel moisture. And let me preface what I'm about to say by saying that there are a lot of factors at play in fire, obviously, so I'm not trying to oversimplify it, but I think if we can look at a few factors, we could get better results in shrubland prescribed burns. Notice the time of year of these fires and the live fuel moisture is present at the time. For some of these fires, fire intensity was driven up by all factors, and we ended up with devastating results in those top two fires in the panel. That said, the later fires, including the planned prescribed burn I'll talk about in a minute, have burned under very different conditions, and the chemise live fuel moistures end up being a useful barometer. In the lilac fire, which there's a picture of at the end of this presentation, we had healthy coastal sage scrub habitat that burned and recovered nicely even with low RHs, possibly due to high fuel moistures. We're planning a prescribed burn through coastal sage scrub and chaparral, and as you can imagine, we've received some pushback from people. Thank you. But I want to go through real quick the veg location and prescription of this burn. Here's some of the photos from the veg of the planned burn. Chemise, sumac, artemisia, black sage, etc. It's all about 4 to 8 feet tall in this burn unit. Here you can see the height. This is the CCC's building a control line. Also here, I can't point to it, but it's up that mountain to the left on the top left. That's where the mesa fire was that I just talked about. Here's the unit from a different angle. Here's how it looks in August, bone dry, same place. The uphill portion that you see that's kind of dark brown has a questionable burn history. And here's another photo, hot, dry fall. Location of the burn, there's the Mesa fire. Very similar slope, aspect, veg, diurnal winds, etc. Go quickly here, you can see the burn history of the planned burn plots. If we're to believe the mapping, it's been about 71 years since it's burned, and there's been no fire in that upper portion. Outside the unit's a little bit different. They've had some repeated fires. You can see the thick chaparral in that upper portion on the right. So the prescription for this fire seeks to mimic optimal conditions for doing no soil damage, consuming most of the 1 to 10 hour fuels, and stimulating growth and seed germination for a variety of species that are on the plot as per pre-fire survey. It's only about 60 acres, but we plan to see increased biodiversity and improved vigor after our burn. So to burn or not to burn, that's the question, right? These are all questions that, you know, if we burn now and it burns later, it's going to be a risk. If we don't burn now and it burns later, it's also a risk. I think that second to last point is one that a lot of people in this room could help answer, which is, you know, has there been so much high intensity fire in chaparral systems in Southern California that maybe even prescribed burns that are going to improve the ecology aren't really warranted? It's tough to say. That last one, if we preserve chaparral areas that have evaded high intensity wildfire up till now, are we just ensuring their destruction later, right? Are we putting that off to a later date? It's just a question. There's that lilac fire, thank you.